Hello and welcome back to Frogboy X1 Gaming. I'm Andrew, and today we're going to talk about if Microsoft needs to up its game. Now that we've seen Horizon Forbidden West, does Microsoft need to up its game? There's no denying that Forbidden West looks amazing. Yes, it looks amazing. That game looks pretty freaking sharp. I've watched the 4K video. I watched the initial reveal at 1080p and 30. The fact of the matter is yes, this game looks amazing, and there's a lot of things you can do when your game is only running at 30 frames a second. So, the question here is it Microsoft that needs to step up its game, or is it Sony that needs to finally step up its game and start doing something, more with performance? I've been a PlayStation guy now for over 25 years, okay? I've been playing games at 30 frames a second, Sony first-party games at 30 frames a second for a very long time now. Since I've played Xbox, since I started getting more into the Xbox, thing, last generation, with the Xbox One X, a lot of things have changed drastically, I would say. Basically the main thing that's changed is I now buy a lot more of my games, my third-party games on the Xbox, just because, chances are I'm going to get better, resolution or frame rate, or, something's going to be, a little bit better, due to the more powerful spec that the Xbox One X had over the PS4 Pro. So that did change a lot for me. I wanted, to take more advantage of my 4K TV, so I did. I started buying more games on the Xbox, and that was an amazing, that was pretty smart, because now they're all even getting upgraded even more. It's true, Microsoft really hasn't put out a whole lot lately, but they have been, funneling a lot more stuff into Game Pass and doing, Game Pass a lot more. In what, 15 days, we're going to know a lot more about the future of Xbox than we're going to know about the PlayStation, unless PlayStation does another large reveal showing, more games. But the way it's looking, we didn't even get a release date for Forbidden West. Pretty much just a teaser, another, hey, it's coming eventually. But the main focus of this video is today is to ask and talk about, does Xbox need to up its visual game? Okay, well, let's think about this for a minute. Gears 5 looks freaking phenomenal. That game looks amazing and hits 60 frames a second. It even hits 120 frames a second in the multiplayer mode. Like, we can't deny, Gears 5 is a beautiful looking game. It looks good. Forza Horizon 4, open world game, hits 60 frames a second, has PC max settings. That game looks freaking amazing. They look good enough to where it's like, wow, dude, that's a good visual experience. Like, there's no denying that. Forza 7, 60 frames a second. There's a lot of detail in there. A lot of detail in that game. It looks freaking amazing. And runs at 60 frames a second in 4K on the Xbox One X. So basically, is what I'm saying is, yeah, I think Xbox is holding its own when it comes to, performance and visuals. They might not be as super, as detailed as Forza or Forbidden West, but they're pretty freaking close. They look pretty dang good for backward compatible running on next gen hardware with more features and stuff. Like, these games, these experiences hold up really well. Like, they hold up to a next gen standard, like an entry level next gen standard, the first year expectancies. I'll tell you, playing Spider-Man at 60 frames a second and Forza Horizon 4 at 60 frames a second, both of those experiences are amazing. Sony was able to do that with the Spider-Man, being backward compatible game and all, cross generation. But what's the excuse for for Horizon Forbidden West? That game is cross-gen. Shouldn't they have been able to show us 4K 60 gameplay on that and not the 4K 30? Like the 4K 30 does, I mean, it looks amazing. Like I'm not even gonna, like there's no way around that. That game looks freaking amazing. But when I hear people coming out saying Xbox needs to do better, dude, Xbox is doing fine, man. They're holding their own. 4K 60 frames a second. Image looks good on my TV. I'm getting freaking way better performing gameplay at 60 frames a second than I do on 30. It's kind of hard to keep up with that 30 frames a second nowadays too. It's so jerky and jittery, and the cutscenes and everything else that, like, what's the point? Like, let's move past 30 frames a second for this generation. Let's completely get rid of it and start going, start aiming towards 60 frames a second. That's what gamers are going to want now. Assassin's Creed Valhalla at 60 frames a second ruined me. I'm completely ruined. I do not want to play open world games at 30 frames a second anymore. I have put Watch Dogs Legion on the back burner. Thankfully, we get an upgrade for that. What is that? Not tomorrow, but the next day. Like, in 2 more days, we get a 60 frames a second upgrade for Watch Dogs Legion. That's the highest requested feature for Watch Dogs Legion, is a 60 frame per second next-gen patch. I wonder why that is. I seriously, like, after playing these games, if you've been a console gamer like myself your whole life, being able to play an open world game at 60 frames a second is freaking way more ground shattering than like way prettier visuals. I mean, it really is, because most of the games that come out on PlayStation 5 are not going to have that visual flash that the Sony first party games are. They just don't, I mean, there's different, resource levels. I mean, the PlayStation experience has always been so fragmented, and any PlayStation gamer, you know that's true. Like, that's true. Like, you'll have really amazing looking first party games, and then maybe your Square Enix, they'll look good. And then, there's a couple other companies, like Red Dead Redemption, like Take-Two Interactive and stuff like that. You have your handful of good studios that can do, pretty close to what PlayStation can. But everything else is hit or miss. And you know that just as well as I know that. And the same thing goes for Xbox. But Xbox, their first party exclusives are more in line. Like the generation with Xbox feels more consistent across the board than it does on the PlayStation. And you know that just as well as I do. So who is it really that needs to up their game? Is it really Microsoft? Do they really need to push for more visuals and take away that performance that us gamers are happy with? I would prefer, because I'll tell you what, I mean, even if Forbidden West comes out with a 60 frames a second patch, I mean, is it going to be Spider-Man level? 60 frames per second and still be able to keep that higher resolution in that video image? Or is it going to be completely stripped back and I don't know. They didn't show us that, so I don't even know if that game's going to get a 60 frames a second patch. The last game still hasn't got a 60 frames a second patch, and it was already a pain in the butt for them to run that on the PC at 60 frames a second. Like, the code base isn't designed for 60 frames a second. So, I mean, I hope it comes with a 60 frames a second mode, but I would have preferred them to work toward that. But seeing as they started development on that back on, the PlayStation 4, I mean, who knows? Maybe we're only getting 4K 30 frames a second on that one. I think Xbox is in a good place right now. I think the Xbox Series X and the Series S are definitely in a good place and focusing on performance over visuals to an extent. Okay, I do want my pretty visuals. But when it comes to stuff like ray tracing, I don't really care about the reflections as much as I do shadow and lighting. That's more important to me, being ray traced, than a reflection. You know, maybe have a reflection for your character, like if you walk past a window or something. You know, your reflection. I mean, that's fine, but I mean, like, reflecting every single surface, that I personally think that's a waste of resources. Give me some really nice SSR with, you know, ray traced, you know, character, you know, being able to see my character when I walk past, you know, like a glass window or something, and ray trace shadows and lighting. That's far more important than reflections everywhere. And if you try to do all of it together, then it tanks performance anyways. So, yeah, like, I want to see some of this, you know, this new UE5, you know, world building too. Like, that looks good. Like, I want to see more of that get used in next gen, and I want to be able to, I want to understand that more going forward. I haven't really seen anything, you know, except for the demos and stuff, and, you know, the one running on PlayStation 5 was running at 1440p 30 frames a second. So if that new Unreal Engine 5 is going to drop the resolution that far and the FPS that far, then I don't know, man. That seems like a pretty heavy technology to be putting into games if the consoles can't run it. And I mean, if PlayStation was at its best, right? If PlayStation 5 was at its best running that, that's, you know, I mean, what's that going to be? A little bit higher on the Xbox Series X, unless the the Fidelity FX and stuff can boost, you know, the resolution higher while still retaining, you know, a 60 frames a second performance. Yeah, I think Xbox is in a good position right now. I think it's honestly PlayStation. After being a PlayStation guy for over 25 years, I think that PlayStation is the one that needs to start getting more into the performance. They need to start putting that more forward and taking that more seriously, as opposed to continuing with the high visual fidelity, you know, games at the cost of performance. I think they need to strike a balance and bring those games to the market the best they can do at 60 frames a second as the baseline, and completely forget about the 30 frames a second. Like, that's last generation. That's been, yeah, let's move past the 30 frames a second this generation. I don't want to see that no more. And we know that third-party developers, because they're developing on Xbox too, multiplats, and if they're going for the performance on the Xbox side, they're going to go for the performance on the PlayStation side. So the visuals are going to take a hit. So yeah, it's just going to make that ecosystem, you know, another unstable roller coaster ride, like it always has been. You know, I mean, we're going to get pretty games on PlayStation 5 that run at 30 frames a second, and then we're going to get third-party games that run at 60 frames a second that don't look as good. So that's going to cannibalize Sony from the inside out. I think people are going to start getting used to the higher performance, and they're going to want that from PlayStation first-party titles as well. And trust me, I mean, it's great that all my PlayStation 4 Pro titles are now 60 frames a second on my PS5, but I don't want to wait till PS6 to play Horizon Zero Dawn at 60 frames a second in 4K. You know what I mean? Like, let's try to get this done, you know, this generation, Sony. Let's do it. PlayStation 5, we should be able to get 60 frames a second moving forward. I'm gonna be happy either way. Like, it doesn't matter. It does matter. It definitely does matter. I want, you know, Sony to start focusing on 60 frames a second. But as it sits right now, I think Microsoft's in a good spot to move forward. I think they are focusing on the right things moving forward, especially for gamers like myself and others out there. We want to see better performance, and we want to see better performance across all of our games, not just racing, sports, and shooter games. We want to see third-person experiences also, you know, holding that 60 frames a second. Like Outriders, freaking amazing experience that on any other generation would have been tied to 30 frames a second. We are now playing this at a locked 60 frames a second with an upscaled 4K image that looks just as good as native 4K. It looks freaking good. I love that game. I love how how amazing that game turned out. Like, I am very happy with Outriders. If we can get more of that this generation, I'm happy with that. And we know the PlayStation 5 can do it because the PlayStation 5 is doing it. So I don't understand why we can't start getting techniques that will make the visuals look even better and be able to give us that higher performance. I don't see why, after seeing Outriders, that we won't be able to see something like Forbidden West run at 60 frames a second and still keep a pretty high visual profile. It would be disappointing if Guerrilla cannot do that. 10 days and we'll see what Ratchet and Clank looks like. I will definitely be reviewing that game. There's no way Sony's going to send me a free code for that because, yeah, I don't have enough followers for that, but I'm definitely going to... I paid my own money for that, and I'm going to review it, and I'm going to tell you how that experience is. So, if you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. I really appreciate all the support that I've been receiving lately for this channel. I do want to grow I do want to grow this channel and continue to be a voice, and I want to continue to be a voice, so don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe. I will see you in the next video. Thank you.